Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of the Shameless Freedom podcast. So, I am super happy and excited to be relaunching and rebranding the podcast that I've had for the last 2.5 years. And this is more than a podcast, this is a movement for women to understand not just the social and cultural beliefs that have been holding us back, but those religious beliefs around money, power, sex, you name it, that stop us from the fullest extent of who we are as women. So, in today's episode, we are going to dive deeper into the whole concept of money, power, and sex are evil. But I want to share with you a little bit more about the vision and purpose of this podcast and what we're here to do. So, what you are going to experience is the first 10 or so episodes are going to be podcasts specifically on limiting beliefs around sexuality and pleasure. And each week, we are going to be diving deep into a specific belief that is rooted in the sexuality from a religious perspective. Now, something I want to make sure that is clear is there is a big difference between societal and cultural and religious beliefs. So we all have societal and cultural beliefs that we can typically relate to as being women in the Western world. And what I would like to say is that each of us has some type of experience with religion. We may not have the same religion. I was raised in a devout Catholic home. You may have been raised in a Protestant home, some other Christian home. You may have been raised in a Jewish family, Muslim. It doesn't matter. Or you may have been raised in an atheist home. But religion impacts our life more than we realize. And what's different about a religious belief or limiting belief is the fact that underneath it, it is rooted in this foundation that you don't question religious beliefs. They just are. They are the foundation of the world and spirituality. And that is why this has been brewing, I should say, and gestating for years because of the power that we have in our religious beliefs. And it's really important for us to understand the depth that happens in these religious beliefs that we likely don't even realize are holding us back. Now, the other thing to mention too is that many women that I have seen who are entering this world of awakening and diving into self-expression and awareness and claiming the fullest expression of themselves. Many people initially focus on money beliefs. And that's actually, it's great, right? You talk about money being evil and money not growing on trees and so many other things. But the truth of the matter is, under money is also our worth. And the fullest extent of who we are as a woman in claiming our value and claiming our worth, it's not just about money. You have to dive into the sexual beliefs, the power beliefs that are also ingrained in our systems. So I think it's really important to know that this is not about sex in itself. This is about education around these beliefs that we have been taught about sex, pleasure, desire, the body, that stop us from claiming our true power as women. And as I have been creating and envisioning this movement and talking with so many other women about religious trauma, they have all said, I know what you're talking about. I've felt it too. We need to be talking more about the religious traumas that are holding ourselves back. So, what I want to do in this movement is I will start by sharing some of my own personal journeys and the lessons that I have learned, the limiting beliefs that I didn't know were limiting, right? And also have guests on to share their stories. Because what I find is that when one woman shares her story, it gives permission for another woman to share her story. And when we start to hear more from other women and we go, hey, you know what? I kind of felt that way too. I never thought that that was a limiting belief that came from religion that you would have never, ever thought to question because it was just ingrained and a part of who you are and the foundation of your belief system from a spirituality perspective. Now, one of the things that I want to make extremely clear here is this. Talking about religious trauma does not mean that you are not spiritual. It does not mean that you don't believe in God, that you don't love the faith that you were raised in, that there aren't wonderful things that we have learned from our religion. In fact, it actually makes us, in my opinion, even more spiritual. And I think one of the reasons that I probably held off on doing this work for so long was because of being afraid of talking out about religion. Because I don't want the haters to come and say, you don't believe in God. That's not true. I've got stories that I can tell you from the last decade of things that people have said to me over the years. And when they're appropriate, they will just arise and come up in these conversations. But this is deep, meaningful work. And I have said my entire journey, my faith has held me back, but my faith has pulled me through. So God is always at the center of everything that I teach and I talk about. And this is a calling and a movement to get us out of the, I'm going to call it man-made religious beliefs that were created with some good intentions. And others may have been created to have power over us. So I think it's really important for us to understand that this is a movement of helping you to dive deeper into your spirituality, into your connection with the divine, and how some of these beliefs that we have been taught have really been stopping us from doing that. So I want to dive a little bit into the whole concept of money, power, and sex being evil. And I want to start that out with a story about my dad. And when he was alive, he and I used to walk every Saturday morning, and we would talk about everything under the sun. And there was one day he said to me, Jen, he's like, how come you aren't talking more about your business? You used to talk more about it. And I had to pause because I was a little nervous about what to say because two things were happening. One, I was diving into sexuality for one, which as an adult woman talking to your dad about sexuality is kind of an awkward topic. But the thing that was even more scary for me was I was poking holes in his faith and in his bedrock of everything that he taught me. And I remember telling him that and sharing my concerns of why I wasn't sharing more with him. And we had a lot of open dialogue after that. And when he was on his deathbed, he died of colon cancer. He actually looked at me and he said, Jen, do you really believe that the Catholic Church teaches the wrong things about sexuality? And I said, yes, they do. And he kind of nodded his head and smiled and gave me his blessing to go out and to make a difference in this world, to create the education around why we need to transform the way that people are talking about religion and sexuality and spirituality and really bring them all together. So when I was married, one of the things that I longed for, and I think a lot of women long for, this deep connection and intimacy with your partner. And I can remember claiming that. This was years ago. This is what I wanted. And when I was moving through my divorce, so fast forward, right? Like I claimed I wanted this. It didn't happen in my marriage, but there was a man friend that I met, and he had said to me, Jen, what turns you on? And I was like, I don't know. And he said, no, seriously, what turns you on? And I had to think for a moment. And the thing is, I had no idea how to answer that question. And and I wasn't embarrassed, but I did think to myself, well, shoot, like I don't know, what does turn me on? And he he looked at me and he goes, Jen, you just need to get fucked. And I was like, oh, who are you? Why would you say that to me? That's like crazy. But it also kind of stirred up this desire in me. I want to know what turns me on. I want to feel like a woman. I want to be desired. I want to be wanted. I want to have this experience with a partner that is fun and sacred and spiritual. And I mean, grant, gosh, like we'll talk more, right? Of fantasies and all that jazz, right? That come up in our lives. The number of women who I talk to that read like romance novels and smutty novels. Oh my gosh, right? Like there are closet women that love reading this stuff, but we don't talk about it. We don't live it. We read about it and we want it, but then we don't want to tell anybody that we want it, right? And it's a part of our human nature. So there was a part of me that I wanted this connection. I wanted to be able to feel this experience, right? Like I was in a marriage for 20 years, and I like to say it was a sexless marriage, minus, 4 children and a handful of, experiences, right? But on on a regular basis, like physical intimacy was not an important piece of our relationship. And it was something that I craved and I wanted. And I laugh because as I was out there exploring and wanting to be with a man and wanting to have this experience, right? Of, oh my God, you really just need to know what it's like to, get fucked, Jen, right? I was like, ooh, okay, that could be kind of nice. I could tell you the crazy stories of how it just never fucking happened. Those are stories for other podcasts or juicier details in my private groups, right? But the reason I share this is because even though I wanted the experience, it didn't happen. How many of you have a desire that you want in your life, no matter what it is? You know you want it, you put it out there, it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because there's some type of belief or double bind or something that is not in congruence with what it is that you want here. And clearly that was happening for me, but I had no idea what it was because I knew what I wanted. I had been healing so many things about myself, my body, etc. And here I was in this position of not being able to attract this experience that I wanted. And then one day I went to it was a women's retreat. So my girlfriend was in charge of something called Chirp, which is Christ Renews His Parish. And I stopped in on one of the days of the retreat to, bring something. And I remember walking in and just listening to a piece of what the priest was sharing at this retreat. And I remember sitting there and he used the words telling all of these women in the room that money and power were evil. And I kid you not, the hair on my arms stood up. I could not wait to get out of that room. And of course, I waited until there was a pause and a moment to leave. And I walked out because I just felt icky. It felt wrong. It was like, I don't I don't believe that. Like, I don't believe money and power are evil, right? Like, I know better than that. I know better than to think money and power are evil. I am a grown adult woman, and I don't believe that. And as I got into my car, I went, oh, fuck, sex is evil too. And it was at that moment I felt in my body that there was this, and I'm going to just name it and claim it, a religious belief about money, power, and sex being evil. And it was after identifying that belief, acknowledging it and feeling it, that I was able to move through it. First, acknowledging it, using embodiment tools, resources, you name it. In about 4 weeks after that experience, the spell was broken. Now, here's the thing. I didn't realize exactly everything that was happening until after it all happened, and now I can tell the stories around it. But I remember them being profound and powerful moments. And there's a difference between seeing a belief and saying sex is evil and saying affirmations around it and really feeling it and knowing where it's coming from. And I think that that's something that we don't necessarily do when it comes to these religious beliefs. It's like another layer underneath societal and cultural. Because if you were born into any type of religious family, that is generational. It is not something you just picked up because you happen to be in the world at this time. It is something that has been passed down from generation to generation to generation and is sacred. It is untouchable. Like, you do not question what you were taught from a religious perspective. And as someone who grew up in a deeply religious community, I mean, literally all of my friends were Catholic. I went through Catholic grammar school and high school. That if that's all you're around and all you don't know anything different. You hang around with the people who have the same belief system and structure that you do. And you don't have a place to talk about it. Even if you went to a Christian Bible study, if you started having doubts, beliefs that didn't feel right, it can sometimes be hard to, one, feel comfortable and safe having that conversation, but like knowing that you can actually even have it, or to think that it is actually sinful for you to even thinking that thought. And and I want women to know that we are not alone, that we need to come together and to be open to talk about these beliefs that really are rooted in the religion that we were raised in. And again, this is not about questioning a higher power. We know in our core, anybody who's going to be listening to this stuff knows there's a higher power. There's a creator that is here supporting us. But it is the dogma and the rules that we were meant to obey that get in the way of us really claiming and owning what is real and what God really wanted for us. And in closing of this first episode, um, I want women, when they come in and they listen or watch these episodes, to relate to these stories. And some of them you may relate to, and some of you may not, and that's okay. But if you do relate, you go, oh my gosh, I never thought of that. You see, that's where some of these beliefs are really getting to us. I never thought of that, or I thought I healed that, right? The whole sex is evil thing, right? The fact that I wanted it and wanted to experience it, I didn't think that it was evil, but you have to be willing and curious to dive deeper. You have to want to know more. There are, I don't want to say steps, but there are things that you can do, embodiment practices that you can utilize resources to help guide you, things that you can do on your own, and things that sometimes you need a practitioner or some other support system to guide you through. But we have to do this together. This is not something we do alone. When I used to host women's circles in my home, all the women would say, I'm so glad that I don't feel alone. Like, I didn't think about what that woman said, but I relate to what she said. Or someone else would say something, and you're like, oh, shoot. Yeah, I feel that too, but I never would have come out and said it. And that's where sisterhood is so important when we were talking about these sacred topics, because there is a component of keeping the sacredness of spirituality and allowing ourselves to question what is serving and what is not serving. And I'll leave you with this. When I was doing research years ago, this was before my dad died, so it was probably about 8 years ago. I remembered interviewing a priest, and I said to him, what does the church really believe about sexuality? Like, I really want to know. Like, here I am, I'm poking holes, right, in this faith around the body, sexuality, intimacy, you name it. And I want to know, what does the church really believe? And what he said to me was this: sexuality is spirituality, Jen. If we taught that, we would have less wounding, less trauma, less rape, more happiness in this world. And I was kind of shocked. I wasn't expecting that answer. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, there are the church teachings from the organization of the church and what is passed down from generation to generation. And then there are the living, breathing examples of the teachings of Jesus. And what is typically passed down are those organized religious doctrine that does not teach the real truth about life, about sexuality and spirituality. Like, to be so bold to say sexuality is spirituality, that is a whole other podcast in itself, because there is a breadth of knowledge and information that we have not been taught in regards to this topic. We have been taught lies that people shared with us from generation to generation because it was what they knew and what they believed. They didn't know anything different. Nobody questioned that it didn't serve. And I want you to open up to the possibility of the power in pleasure, to the power in owning your sexuality, in elevating your experience in your spirituality, when you can dive deeper into becoming curious about this topic. So, if you loved what you heard here today, I invite you to give us a review, like the podcast, review, comment, share it with a friend, please. The way that this movement is going to grow is by women like you who are touched by these experiences and stories and share with other women. So the greatest gift that you could give is to share this with someone else. If you want to be on the podcast as a guest, to share something that was powerful for you, I'd love for you to reach out. I've already got a wait list happening to have guests on this podcast because I think it's really important, right? My story is someone else's story, right? And we are going to learn from each other on this journey to break free from the religious beliefs that have been holding us back from our freedom and making more money in your business, having the relationship of your dreams, doing things that you absolutely love without the shame or the guilt. We no longer need to live in silence. I invite you to break free from the chains that have held you caged and trapped for years, that fear that has held you back because it is this foundational religious belief in your system that is not allowing you to open up, to expand, to even question. And let me tell you, this is not something that's going to happen overnight, depending on where you are in your journey. And when we dive deeper, like I said, we're going to start with like 10 different really core beliefs. And it's going to expand from there. And this is something that I personally believe in my heart is going to transform the world. Because here's the truth. When you heal your sexuality and your relationship with yourself, your body, your ability to experience pleasure, your sexuality, your spirituality, you are shifting the energy, not just for you. You are shifting it for future generations. You're shifting it for your children and your children's children. so that they are not going to have to succumb to these religious beliefs that keep getting passed down from generation to generation. You have the power to be brave and bold and courageous and stop that just for you, for your children, for their children, and for other families that you are meant to impact in this world. And that's why Shameless Freedom is a movement. And I invite you to join me on this adventure to letting go of the past and to stepping into this fullest expression of who you really are. Thank you.